Part 5, The Tremendous Tomorrow. 27. The New Race. Jacques Bergier and Louis Pauwels, in the concluding chapter of their book, Morning of the Magicians, engage in a fascinating discussion as to whether a race of mutants is being born among us today. One reason given was that the amount of strontium-90 in the atmosphere, as the result of nuclear experiments, has affected the human genes and caused new children to be born with a much higher IQ. This is certainly an intriguing idea. It is certainly noticeable that young people today, generally speaking, are very different from previous generations. There is much talk about the generation gap. That is, the differences and lack of understanding between many parents and their children. There have, of course, always been some differences and disagreements between parents and children throughout the ages, but never to such an extent as today. Furthermore, these differences are not confined to those between parents and children, but reach out to those between the younger generation and the establishment in every department that you can visualize. The new race of young people have brought about radical changes in many spheres. For example, in music, painting, sculpture, the theater, dress and hairstyles, and in attitudes to life generally. The music and lyrics of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones and other groups, were absolutely different to anything that had been heard before. It caught on like wildfire with young people everywhere, who instinctively identified themselves with the sounds. As I write these words, I am listening to a song being broadcast by BBC Radio 2 on their late-night Extra 9 program called, "We're Going to Change the World." That is the mood of the younger generation today. A complete revolution has been achieved. Young men and women, both with long hair and colorful attire, it is often difficult to determine which of a pair is the male or female, walk our streets today like visitors from some far-off planet. They have made themselves a force to be reckoned with on university campuses throughout the world. Even that great man de Gaulle had difficulty in coping with the student revolts in the streets of Paris. Another point well worth bearing in mind is that an enormous number of the young today are interested in magic, witchcraft, psychic phenomena, and extrasensory perception. They are searching for a deeper awareness of themselves and of the cosmos. I sometimes get the impression they are trying to find something that is their heritage. Something with which they are really familiar. Some of them use drugs. That is to be deplored, but that scene is all part of the picture. Their morals, their outlook on life generally, is completely different to that of their elders. They speak a different language. Now, the startling idea I am trying to put over is that this new race of young people could be an alien one. Of course, I am not saying that they are extraterrestrials, but that due to the effects of strontium-90, it is possible that some additional characteristics or influences have got into their basic makeup. Bergier and Pauwels wrote. Two American scientists, C. Brookworth and Robert K. Enders, in an important work entitled, The Nature of Living Things, believe there is proof that the genes groups have been disturbed, and that, under the influence of forces that are still mysterious, a new race of men is appearing, endowed with superior intellectual powers. This is, of course, a subject to be approached with caution. The genetician Louis Terman, however, after 30 years' study of infant prodigies, has reached the following conclusions. Most infant prodigies used in the past to lose their faculties on becoming adult. It would seem today that they tend to become a superior kind of adult, gifted with an intelligence that has nothing in common with that of ordinary human beings. They are 30 times as active as a normal man of talent. Their success index is multiplied by 25. Their health is perfect, as well as their sentimental and sexual balance. Finally, they escape the psychosomatic diseases, notably cancer. Is this certain? One thing is certain, and that is that we are now witnessing a progressive acceleration throughout the world of the mental faculties, and this is also true of the physical. The phenomenon is so evident that another American scientist, Dr. Sidney Pressey, of the University of Ohio, has just drawn up a plan for the instruction of precocious children, capable, in his opinion, of producing 300,000 superior intelligences a year. It would seem that we are now experiencing a period of infiltration of our species, perhaps comparable to the advent of Cro-Magnon man thousands of years ago. Incidentally, ape man had been on this planet for some thousands of years before the arrival of Cro-Magnon man. It is possible, and I throw this idea out for what it is worth, That Cro-Magnon man who arrived very suddenly and a definite advance on his predecessors, was the new human made by the Elohim. Cro-Magnon man is said by various experts, who always disagree, to have arrived here very suddenly, sometime between 50,000 years to 100,000 years ago. My remarks that the last 2 decades are bringing forth a new race of children should not upset the parents. The children do, of course, take on the hereditary characteristics of their fathers and mothers, and look like them physically, but are blessed, generally speaking, with higher intelligence, and are physically better endowed than previous generations. We must not be frightened of change. For far too long we have stagnated in a rut. The new race of young people have succeeded in jolting us out of it to some extent. Not all change is necessarily a good thing, but let's face it, very often we don't like it because the old way of life had become so familiar. If we are going to live in the new space age, it is essential to be able to cope with change. To illustrate this better, I am going to quote from a delightful science fiction book called Out of This World, by Ben Barsman. What was it about him? Then it hit me. Wilfred was perfectly at home. It didn't matter that it was another planet, and that he had flown through space, and that we were participating in a fabulous event. Wilfred felt at ease. He belonged. He was a part of it. He had always been a part of it. That had always been his quality, whether it was a geisha house in Nagasaki or a London drawing room, or arguing with my uncle Debret. I think I figured out why. It was because he accepted nothing as permanently fixed: people, institutions, values. There wasn't a goddamn thing you couldn't change, if you felt they needed changing. When you feel that way, you're no longer scared. You're at ease. You can do something about it, handle it. Not like me. If you don't walk into a snug ready-made world with hot and cold running comfort, you've had it, I hear myself say to myself. You can only cross your fingers and hope for the best. That's why anything new scares you. Wilfred finally bought it in a plane anyway, but while he lived he was alive. He didn't let 2/3 of himself go down the drain in vague fears and apologizing for being alive. Suddenly felt exhilarated. I had made a discovery as important, it seemed to me, as discovering a twin planet. I'd found out why I'd been afraid. Our young people today are not afraid of change. They welcome it. Like Wilfred in the extract from the science fiction story just related, they are at ease with the new way of life. We have been spelling out in no uncertain terms the possibility that our planet is in process of being taken over by a new race, quite unconsciously, of course, which is being born here as a result of strontium-90 affecting the human genes. These new children, many of them now adult, may not be aware of the possibility that mysterious forces have endowed them with superior intellectual powers. A few may question their marked abilities and ponder over it. I wouldn't know. In any case, I am not criticizing the younger generation, but merely pointing out that, generally speaking, they are completely different to previous generations. There is, of course, a minority of teenagers that spend their spare time spoiling other people's pleasure, wantonly damaging property at holiday resorts and, generally, making a nuisance of themselves. These young people are in a different category. Their moronic behavior is due, in part, to overcrowding, and lack of local facilities to release their pent-up energies. They, too, want to bring about change, but in their misguided way vent their angry frustrations on their fellow beings. However, although they make the front pages of our national newspapers, they are a minority and not really typical of the younger generation. Despite these militant teenage gangs and the drug addicts, it is our contention that taken, by and large, the new generation is a remarkable phenomenon. John Keel, the American ufologist, has hinted that our planet is in the process of being taken over by what he calls ultraterrestrials. This is an interesting name. He implies that they are already here. However, as far as I know, he did not state that they were the new race of young people. On the other hand, he also implied that many people today on this planet were being manipulated, or influenced. Well, according to Bergier and Powles, the younger generation born among us have been influenced by mysterious forces from outside. In any case, it seems to me a very progressive and good influence. Along with the new race now born among us, we have the manifestations of flying saucers, and psychic activity that have been intensifying during the same 2 decades. This is no mere coincidence. It could be, and this is pure speculation, that the new children are the advance guard for the coming of the Sky People. As we have already pointed out, they are extremely receptive to, and interested in what are termed, New Age subjects. Another point to be borne in mind is that these young people will be the rulers of the world in a few years' time. They will fill the positions of responsibility in politics, industry, communications, astronautics, and the arts. Some do so already. Many people think that we are approaching the end of a cycle or an age, and that we are in what they call the latter days. Perhaps, we are. In short, that we are on the threshold of big events, such as an Armageddon or some natural catastrophe involving a flip of the poles. They point to the problems of overpopulation, pollution, and possible worldwide famine, as well as to the increasing number of wars and earthquakes. They cite the general increase of crime, and skullduggery. Other pointers are the general all-round degeneration of morals, and the emphasis on sex, and finally, biblical prophecies about the end of this age. Nevertheless, though some of these doomsday prophecies may come to pass, I take an optimistic view. I have faith in this new young generation. Although, we hear a lot about hippies and layabouts, there are now some very talented and gifted young people of both sexes among us. I think that if the genes have been disturbed through the effects of strontium-90, we have been given another of those shots in the arm, referred to earlier, and that our young people will lead us to the stars. Maybe, to another golden age. 28. The Lattice. All through history, there have been groups of people who were the possessors of certain knowledge, that has been handed down from generation to generation. It was passed on to new, carefully selected, and initiated keepers by Masons, mystery schools, and other esoteric groups, who in turn worked with it and kept the secrets. This knowledge was the secret wisdom, and today, it is becoming more widely known than hitherto, because we are living in the age of Aquarius. The true mysteries are still kept secret by those who respect their trust, and there are many real occultists who do not exploit their knowledge. On the other hand, the scientific world is rapidly learning the secrets of the esotericist. Bergier and Powell have pointed out that our advanced modern physicists are the alchemists of today. Unfortunately, what the physicist learns today, the politician will use tomorrow for military and aggressive ends, certainly not desired by the originators of the mysteries. That is one of the reasons such care was used to keep secret or hidden the secret wisdom. The secrecy imposed by the mystery schools has nothing in common with the suppressions of certain truths by the Church a few centuries after the birth of Christianity. This was something different, a desire for control and power. At one time, the Church had much more temporal power than it has now. The real initiate or man of wisdom does not wish to control his fellows. That is why the master alchemist, Fulcanelli, after completing his literary masterpiece, Le Mystère des Cathédrales, handed it over to Eugene Canziliot, who was studying under him, and disappeared immediately afterwards. This was in 1928, when Fulcanelli was 72. Legend has it that the alchemist is still alive in the flesh, that he had made the last Adeptus transformation, and now, like the equally legendary Saint Germain, is living in the world under another name with the appearance of a man in his 40s. We suggest that his disappearance was due to the fact that his knowledge was beyond price, and would be too invaluable to be given out to a materialistic world that would abuse it. It is said that the intelligence services of several countries have vainly tried to trace him. Undoubtedly, there have been people in the past centuries who were familiar with the ancient wisdom. Men who worked together and communicated with each other. It was something more than a network of minds. The term lattice in the sense of a crystal structure illustrates the concept better. I would like to suggest that in the fourfold cosmos there is a lattice too. That each member of it works, functions, behaves, lives and moves, and has his being as if alone. Yet, under proper conditions each is accessible to all. Each has his store of data. Like a tiny component in a great modern computer, each is itself. Yet, without it, no answer given out by the complete lattice will be entirely correct. It is my contention that people on this earth have been able to contact this lattice, and that is from where they have got their inspirations and discoveries. Once again, it is appreciated that this is a highly controversial suggestion. How does one hook into this lattice? I would suggest that all men, the Elohim, are hooked into it irrevocably since the first day of creation. Nevertheless, humans can, I suggest, contact the lattice, by the time-honored methods of sleeping with the idea, prayer, and meditation. It may well be argued that surely it is sufficient to direct your supplications direct to God Himself. The point is well taken. However, He is no doubt very busy, and He has, in my humble opinion, a lattice. So, why not use it, and send your questions to His able lieutenants waiting to give the answers? Rather like going up the normal channels in the civil service, only in this case the service is more efficient. Now, you may ask, what has this all got to do with the UFOs? Well, it has quite a lot. Actually, the UFOs are only a side effect of a very big operation. To us ufologists, they are very important, or seem to be. However, when you look into this subject in depth, they are only vehicles bringing the UFO nauts here. The real interest is, why are they coming here? It is my idea that we have been made and put here. That the makers are concerned with developing us unobtrusively, in short, that we make the grade ourselves, with occasional shots in the arm, and eventually, that we will take our place in the galactic civilization. One way in which we can make progress is through contact with the lattice. I appreciate that this is a hypothetical idea, but many occultists down the centuries will vouch for its existence. Anyway, it is more celestial food for thought.